between sales of Rayo sauce in the grocery store and full-service restaurant foot traffic. They found nearly a 50% negative correlation between Rayo's volume velocity and traffic growth in Italian chains, and a 67% negative correlation to restaurants overall.
You think you know pasta sauce, a jar, some tomatoes, a Wednesday night dinner sorted. That is what the label wants you to think. Most UK pasta sauce jars contain more sugar than a chocolate biscuit, more thickeners than tomatoes, and branding designed specifically to stop you reading the small print. 5 of the most trusted names on the British supermarket shelf are not giving you what the packaging implies. Some hide behind Italian flags, some hide behind clean label promises. One hid behind advice from its own manufacturer that most shoppers never heard. By the end of this video, you will know which 5 to put back, and the 5 that are actually worth your money. We are starting with the worst one. Brand 1 Dolmio Original Bolognese sauce. Wednesday night, mince browning in the pan, that familiar red jar on the worktop. Dolmio built the British weeknight bolognese, decades of it, generation after generation of families who never once questioned the jar. Why would they? It was just dinner. Then the manufacturer spoke. In 2015, Fiona Dawson was global president of Mars Food. Mars Food owns Dolmio. She told the press directly that Dolmio should carry a once-a-week label. Not a regulator, not a campaigner, the person running the company. Saying publicly that their own product had limits, most families were not observing. That statement made headlines for roughly 48 hours. Then the marketing continued. The jar stayed on the shelf. Most people never heard a word of it. Here is what prompted that admission. A standard serving of Dolmio Original contains around 6 grams of sugar per half jar serving. Eat a full jar between 2 people, and the sugar figure climbs toward the daily recommended limit for a child. The salt content per serving is high enough that the NHS would flag it. The ingredient list includes modified maize, starch, a thickener. It compensates for a tomato base thinner than the deep red color implies. Open that Dolmio jar right now. Look at the color before it hits the mince. Thick, vivid, almost uniform. Pour some onto a white plate. Watch how slowly it moves. That consistency does not come from tomatoes alone. Read the label from the first ingredient to the last. Count how far down you get before something unexpected appears. The front of the jar shows a sun-drenched Italian landscape. Terracotta, vines, the suggestion of a nonna somewhere in the background. The back of the jar tells a different story, in considerably smaller type. For parents who have served Dolmio 2 or 3 nights a week for years, the sugar and salt accumulation is not a single meal problem, it is a dietary pattern problem. Children's recommended daily sugar limits are considerably lower than adults. A jar designed for convenience was not designed around those limits. Mars Food knew what was in the jar. Their own executive said so out loud. The marketing just made sure you were looking somewhere else. The next brand charges you more for the Italian illusion. The illusion does not hold up either. Brand 2 Sacla Italia Tomato Sauce Range. The name alone does the work. Sacla Italia. Right there on the label, rustic font, warm colors, the kind of packaging that belongs in a delicatessen rather than a supermarket aisle. This is not a cheap jar. It does not sit with the budget options. It positions itself differently, slightly apart, slightly elevated. The packaging implies care. It implies respect for the contents. It implies someone made considered decisions about what went inside. That implication is doing considerable heavy lifting. Look at a jar of Sacla tomato sauce right now. Find the full ingredient list on the back. Read it from the first entry to the last. Under UK food labelling law, ingredients must be listed in descending order of weight. The first ingredient is the most prominent. Work down from there. You will find tomatoes. You will also find glucose syrup. Modified starch, seed oil, flavoring listed without further specification. These are not the ingredients of a sauce made with care. These are the ingredients of a mass-produced product wearing a premium outfit. The glucose syrup entry is worth dwelling on. It is a refined sugar derivative. It enhances flavor, improves texture, and extends shelf life. It does not appear in a sauce made from quality tomatoes treated simply. It appears when the base ingredient needs help tasting like something. The FSA ingredient order rules exist precisely so consumers can see this. Most people do not read that far down the label. Sackler's front of pack is designed to ensure they do not feel the need to. Sackler products are stocked in Waitrose, Sainsbury's, Ocado, and independent delicatessens across the UK. The price point sits between £3 and £4 per jar. At that price, in that context, the reasonable consumer assumption is quality. The ingredient list is not a quality ingredient list. For home cooks who reach for Sackler believing they are building a better meal from better base ingredients, that belief is the product being sold, not the tomatoes. The flag on the label is Italian. The formulation is considerably more ordinary than that flag implies. Paying Italian prices for industrial ingredients, subscribe and we will keep reading what the label is not telling you. A brand promising clean eating is next. The promise has some gaps in it. Brand 3, Tesco, own label, pasta sauce range, under £1, right there on the shelf. No Italian branding, no heritage story, no premium positioning, just a clean, simple jar at a price that makes complete sense when you're managing a real food budget in a genuinely difficult economy. This looks like the rational choice. That is exactly the problem. The Tesco own label pasta sauce range uses tomato concentrate as its primary tomato sauce, not whole tomatoes, not crushed tomatoes. Concentrate. This distinction matters more than it sounds. Tomato concentrate is a processed reduction. Water is removed first. The tomato is compressed, then reconstituted later in the production process. It is a fundamentally different product from a sauce built on whole tomatoes. Under FSA labeling rules, concentrate must be declared. It is, in small type, below several other things. Pick up that Tesco jar right now. Find the tomato entry on the ingredient list. Check whether it says tomatoes or tomato concentrate. Then find the sugar content on the nutrition panel. A standard serving from this range contains sugar levels that would surprise most people reaching for what they consider a simple tomato sauce. The water content inflates the jar weight without inflating nutritional value. The starch thickens a base that would otherwise read as thin. The color additive gives the sauce a depth of red that the tomato content alone would not produce. None of this is illegal. Every ingredient is declared. The FSA permits all of it. But the cumulative picture is considerably further from a tomato sauce than the label implies, under £1. And you can taste exactly where that saving was made. The jar design is clean and simple. White background, clear font. It reads as honest, precisely because it does not try too hard. That simplicity is doing the same job as Sackler's Italian branding. It manages your perception before you read a word of the small print. For students and young families eating this 4 or 5 nights a week as a dietary staple, the sugar accumulation and the low whole tomato content are not occasional concerns. They are consistent features of a regular meal. Budget eating should not mean compromised ingredients. It currently does here. The price is real. The tomatoes are partial. Everything else fills the gap between what you paid and what a real tomato sauce costs to make honestly. The next brand spent considerable money telling you it is better than this. Look closely at whether it is. Brand 4, Lloyd Grossman tomato and basil sauce. No artificial colors, no artificial preservatives. Right there on the front of the jar, clean, confident. The language of considered eating printed in reassuring type on a product that costs nearly £3 and sits in the better for you section of the pasta sauce aisle. Lloyd Grossman built a brand on the idea of the discerning home cook, the informed consumer, the person who reads labels and makes thoughtful choices. The front of pack speaks directly to that person. It tells them their diligence has already been done. It has not. Find a jar of Lloyd Grossman tomato and basil right now, turn it over. Go straight to the nutrition panel and find the sugar line. A standard serving contains sugar levels that sit above what most clean eaters would consider acceptable in a savory sauce. Now find modified maize starch in the ingredient list. It is there, a processed thickener. Not artificial under current FSA definitions, which means it does not have to appear anywhere on the front of pack. That is the gap the labeling law creates. Lloyd Grossman sits in it very comfortably. Under UK FSA guidance, the distinction between artificial and natural additives is a technical one, not a nutritional one. An ingredient can be heavily processed, derived from a modified source, and still qualify as non-artificial under the current framework. No artificial additives does not mean no additives. It means no additives falling within the FSA's specific artificial classification. The front of pack is accurate, it is also incomplete, those are not the same thing. The basil content in Lloyd Grossman tomato and basil sauce is listed toward the lower end of the ingredient hierarchy. The name of the sauce foregrounds it, the formulation does not. Lloyd Grossman presents itself as the answer for post-illness shoppers and clean eaters, those who made a deliberate decision to move away from heavily processed food. The sugar content and the modified starch suggest it is a more moderate improvement than the front of pack implies. That gap between promise and reality is not a small one when the decision to buy was made on health grounds. No artificial additives. The sugar got in anyway. Think clean label means clean ingredients? Subscribe before your next supermarket shop. The last jar on this list is the one sitting in more British cupboards than any other. Nobody has ever really looked at it. Brand 5. Heinz Tomato Pasta Sauce Range. No promises on the front. No Italian heritage. No clean label claims. No wellness language. Just the name. That familiar Keystone shield. The brand so embedded in British food culture that it stopped needing to try decades ago. Heinz does not sell you a story, it sells you certainty. The quiet, absolute certainty that comes from a name you have known since childhood, a name your parents knew, a name that has been in British kitchens for so long it feels less like a brand choice and more like a household fact. That certainty is the product, not the sauce. Open the Heinz pasta sauce jar in your cupboard right now. Look at it properly. Read every line on the back label, possibly for the first time. Find the sugar content per serving. Find the modified starch entry. Find the flavoring listed without further specification. Find the tomato content percentage. Then ask yourself whether that number matches what you pictured when you reached for the jar. Most people have never done this. Heinz knows that. A standard serving of Heinz tomato pasta sauce contains sugar levels that sit higher than most shoppers would associate with a savory dinner ingredient. The tomato content relies heavily on concentrate rather than whole or crushed tomatoes. Modified starch thickens a base that would read as thin without it. The deep, consistent red color is maintained through processing rather than through tomato quality. Every ingredient is declared, every entry complies with FSA labeling requirements. The jar is entirely legal, it is also engineered to taste like what you remember, rather than to deliver what you think you are getting. The Heinz name removes the question before it forms. You do not read the label on a jar you have never once doubted. That unquestioned trust is not something Heinz stumbled into. It is something the brand has maintained carefully for a very long time. For elderly shoppers who have bought Heinz products across an entire lifetime of weekly shops, the trust is not irrational. It was earned in a different era. The formulation of the pasta sauce range they are buying today is not the product that earned it. The name stayed the same. The jar quietly changed around it. When a brand is trusted completely, nobody reads the label. That is a comfortable place. to hide. Go check your cupboard right now, not at the end of the video now. If you can see any of those 5 jars, put this on pause, read the back label properly, probably for the first time. Look at the sugar line, find the tomato entry, check whether it says tomatoes or tomato concentrate. You were not careless for missing this. The labels were not designed to make it easy to find. 5 brands, 5 different versions of the same calculation. Dress the jar well enough, price it confidently enough, or simply be trusted enough. Do any of those things and most shoppers will never read past the front of pack. The system rewards that it was built to. This is not about panic. It is not about throwing everything out and starting again. It is about one piece of information, one you were always entitled to have and were never clearly given. What is actually inside the jar you are paying for? The good news is straightforward. Some brands still put real tomatoes first, not as a marketing claim, as a formulation decision that shows up plainly in the ingredient list. 5 of them, already on British shelves, some in your regular supermarket, some worth seeking out. Here is what honest pasta sauce actually looks like. Safe, pick one, Mutti pasta sauce range, real tomatoes first, everything else second. Not a marketing line, a formulation decision, one that shows up immediately when you read the Mutti ingredient list from top to bottom: tomatoes, olive oil, salt, basil. The list is short because the product is simple. Not simple because corners were cut. Simple because nothing unnecessary was added to compensate for a weak base ingredient. Mutti is an Italian producer with a long, specific relationship with the tomato, based in the Parma region, harvesting at peak ripeness within hours of the tomatoes leaving the field. That speed is a production choice, and it shows up in the jar. That timing matters considerably. Tomato quality degrades quickly after harvest. Processing speed is a direct indicator of seriousness. Mutti publishes the tomato variety on their packaging, not just tomatoes, the specific variety. That level of detail is almost unheard of in the mainstream pasta sauce category. It is the equivalent of a wine producer naming the grape. It tells you the producer knows exactly what is in the jar and is not embarrassed by it. Pick up a jar of Mutti from your nearest Waitrose, Sainsbury's, or Ocado right now. Read the ingredient list from first entry to last. Count the total number of ingredients. Then go back and count the ingredients in the Dolmio jar, or the Lloyd Grossman, or the Heinz. The difference is not subtle. Pour Mutti cold into a white bowl before it hits the pan. The color is deeper and less uniform than the sauces covered earlier in this video, slightly uneven, slightly textured. That irregularity is what real tomatoes look like before they have been heavily processed into something more visually consistent. Cook it briefly and the smell changes immediately. Sharper, more acidic in the early stages. That acidity is natural tomato character. It is what gets engineered out of mass-produced sauces because focus groups find it unfamiliar. For families who have been buying premium position jars and assuming the price reflected tomato quality, Mutti is the clearer version of that promise. The price is comparable to Sackler. The ingredient list is not comparable at all. Short ingredient list, long growing history, nothing in the jar that should not be there. Safe pick 2, Napolina tomato sauce range. This one is important, not because it is the most exciting brand in this video, because it is in every major UK supermarket. It costs under £2 and the ingredient list is genuinely clean. That combination should not be as rare as it is. Napolina has been a fixture in British supermarket pasta aisles for decades. A mainstream presence, an ordinary price. It does not carry artisan credentials. It does not position itself as specialist. For a long time, that ordinariness made it easy to overlook entirely. The ingredient list is why it is here. Find Napolina in your nearest Tesco, Morrison's, Sainsbury's or Asda right now. Turn the jar over. Read the ingredients from the top. Tomatoes, tomato juice, onion, olive oil, salt, basil, garlic. read that list again. Then read the Dolmio list. Then the Heinz list. The difference in length alone tells you something significant before you have processed a single ingredient name. No modified starch, no glucose syrup, no flavoring listed without specification, no color additive maintaining a red that the tomatoes alone cannot produce, just the ingredients you would reach for if you made this yourself. Listed in an order that puts the tomato where it belongs. The tomatoes used across the Napolina range are Italian grown, whole peeled or crushed depending on the product variant, not reconstituted from concentrate. That distinction alone separates Napolina from Tesco own label and Heinz at a comparable price point. Comparable price, meaningfully different contents. Pour it into the pan and the behavior is different from the budget own label sources covered earlier. Less water releasing in the first minute of heat. More texture holding through cooking. The sauce reduces rather than evaporates because there is more real tomato content left to reduce. The flavor is sharper and less sweet than Dolmio or Heinz. That will read as unfamiliar to anyone whose palate has been calibrated on heavily sweetened pasta sauces. That unfamiliarity is not a flaw. It is what tomatoes actually taste like without added sugar smoothing out the acidity. For budget-conscious shoppers who assumed clean ingredients required a premium price, Napolina is the most direct rebuttal to that assumption on the British supermarket shelf. Clean does not have to mean expensive. This jar proves it every week. Real tomatoes. Honest price. No explanation required. Safe pick 3, Serio Tomato, Passata and Pasta Sauce range, a cooperative, not a corporation. That distinction matters more than it sounds, and it shows up directly in what ends up inside the jar. Serio sources its tomatoes through an Italian agricultural cooperative model. The farmers growing the tomatoes are members, not anonymous commodity suppliers, not interchangeable units in a global procurement chain, members, with a direct stake in the quality of what gets processed and sold under the Serio name. When quality drops, they feel it. That accountability runs both ways. Inside a standard corporate supply chain, it simply cannot. Most pasta sauce producers source tomatoes through open commodity markets. Price is the primary variable. Origin, variety, and growing practice are secondary at best. The cooperative model inverts that priority. Quality comes first, because the people setting the standard are the same people growing the crop. That structure shows up in the jar. Find a Serio product in your nearest supermarket right now. Sainsbury's, Tesco, Ocado, and Waitrose all stock the range. Read the ingredient list on the passata or the pasta sauce variant. Tomatoes, salt, nothing else in the passata. A small number of additional ingredients in the sauce variants, each one identifiable, each one straightforward, no modified starch, no glucose syrup, no flavoring without specification. The passata in particular is worth examining closely. Pour it cold into a glass. The color is a deep, slightly orange-tinged red, not the vivid, uniform scarlet of a processed sauce. The consistency is liquid, but not watery. It moves like crushed tomatoes rather than like a starch-thickened product. That difference is visible before you apply any heat at all. Cook it, and the reduction is genuine. The sauce thickens because water is evaporating from real tomato content, not because a thickener is maintaining a consistency that was engineered in at the production stage. The regional origin of Serio tomatoes is declared, grown in southern Italy, predominantly in the Campania region, volcanic soil, a climate that produces tomatoes with a natural acidity and sweetness that processed concentrate cannot replicate. For home cooks who want to understand what they are building a meal from, Serio gives you the answer before you ask the question. Cooperative farming, traceable origin, An ingredient list short enough to read in under 10 seconds. That brevity is not laziness. It is confidence in the base ingredient. Safe pick 4. Seggiano organic pasta sauce. Quiet label, minimal design, no celebrity name on the front. Seggiano does not need to shout. The ingredient list does the work instead. This is a specialist brand. You will not find it in every supermarket. Whole Foods, Waitrose, independent delicatessens and online retailers stock it. The price reflects the production method rather than the marketing budget. A jar sits at around £4 to £5 depending on the retailer. That price warrants an honest explanation of what it is buying. Seggiano is certified organic through the Soil Association, applied to a short, controlled ingredient list. Every entry traceable, every entry intentional. Organic status on a product with 5 ingredients means something specific. Considerably more specific than organic status applied across a long, complex supply chain, where the certification and the contents are harder to connect directly. The tomatoes are Italian-grown and organically farmed, processed without the heat treatments that destroy volatile aromatic compounds in cheaper production methods. Cold break processing preserves the fresh tomato character that high-heat industrial methods remove entirely. The flavor that survives into the jar was never cooked out in the first place. That is not a marginal difference. It is the reason the sauce smells different the moment it opens. Open a jar of Seggiano right now if you have one. If you do not, this is worth finding before your next pasta night. Smell it before it hits the pan. There is a brightness to it, a freshness, that is absent from every brand in the avoid section of this video. That aromatic quality is not added back in through flavoring. It was never removed in the first place. Across most Seggiano variants, the ingredient list runs to 5 entries: tomatoes, extra virgin olive oil, garlic, basil, salt. The olive oil is not listed simply as vegetable oil, it is specified as extra virgin because the producer considers the distinction worth making, and it is. For clean eaters and post-illness shoppers who felt misled by Lloyd Grossman's front of pack promises, Seggiano is the version of that promise that holds up when you turn the jar over. The certification is real, the ingredient list backs it up. The price reflects the actual cost of doing this honestly. A jar that contains exactly what it says it does. That should not feel remarkable. In this category, right now, it does. Safe pick 5. Rao's homemade marinara. No added sugar. Those 3 words are rarer in the pasta sauce aisle than they should be. Rao's homemade marinara started as the house sauce of a New York Italian restaurant. It crossed the Atlantic, it landed on UK shelves. Enough people tried it and found nothing comparable in a jar. The reason is straightforward. The formulation refuses to do what every mainstream competitor does as a matter of routine. No added sugar, no modified starch, no seed oils. Olive oil only. Whole peeled Italian tomatoes as the primary ingredient, not concentrate, not a processed reduction. Whole tomatoes listed first because they are first. Find a jar of Rao's in Waitrose, Ocado, or online right now. Read the ingredient list in full. Tomatoes, olive oil, onions, salt, garlic, basil, oregano, 7 entries. Each one a recognizable ingredient, not a process, not a derivative, not a classified additive sitting within a labeling loophole. Compare that list to the Dolmio label or the Heinz. The gap is not a small one. The olive oil matters specifically. Every cheaper competitor uses seed oil or lists vegetable oil without further specification. Olive oil costs more to use. Rao's uses it anyway, because the flavor profile and the nutritional quality are not comparable to the alternative. For low sugar shoppers, for anyone who has spent time reading pasta sauce labels and found the options quietly defeating, this jar is the answer, and it is sitting on a mainstream supermarket shelf. The price is the highest on this list. around £6 out of £7 per jar. That is not a casual purchase, it is an honest one. You are paying for the actual cost of refusing to cut corners, not for the marketing budget that surrounds it. No added sugar, just sauce. 5 jars that are not giving you what the label implies, 5 that are. The difference between those two groups is not always price. It is whether the producer trusted you enough to put real tomatoes first and let the ingredient list speak for itself. Most did not. These 5 do. Check the jar in your cupboard. Read the back, not the front. The front is marketing, the back is the truth. Want to know which other supermarket staples are leaving things off the label? Subscribe and we will keep checking.